Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment where myself and the defense have an opportunity to speak to you directly. It's called our closing statement, our closing arguments. All the evidence that you're going to hear in this case, you've already heard it. It's either sitting right here or it's through testimony that you've already heard. And so my goal here is to just talk a little bit about this case with you and sort of explain the state's perspective and how we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Zach Hughes did in fact commit the crimes that he's alleged to have committed. And I'm going to go through those crimes a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to go briefly through the evidence and explain my perspective on those things. I will give you a bit of a caveat that this is a little bit of a unique case in that you rarely have the defendant testifying and admitting to the entire crime during the trial. So in that respect, my closing argument may be a little different or maybe a little abnormal than our normal way we do things, but I'm going to do my best. I first want to thank you for your service. It's been a long 2 weeks. Y'all have been extremely attentive. You've paid attention. You've listened to the judge. And to be frankly, I couldn't ask for a better jury, and I appreciate your service. On behalf of my co-counselor, Mr. Jake Hoferth, Investigator Jared Sparkman, and Master Deputy Blake Wolf, we thank you for your service. Now, I told you in my opening statements that once you see and hear all the testimony in this trial, and I did not know that the defendant was going to testify, you're going to find that Zach Hughes, I don't know if you remember what I said, is a cold-blooded killer. And I submit that the state, and along with the testimony of Zach Hughes, we did in fact prove all of that beyond a reasonable doubt. Zach Hughes is a cold-blooded killer. Zach Hughes is an admitted cold-blooded killer. And keep in mind, he solved John Mello's problems. So the judge is going to instruct you on the law, and just as we're going to abide by his rulings, you must abide by his instructions. Remember I told you he's the referee, calls balls and strikes, and he also tells us what the rules are, what the law is. Y'all took an oath way long ago than you can probably remember, back in last week on Monday, a week ago, and you said you would take an oath, you would adhere to his instructions, you would do your duty as jurors, and I have no doubt in my mind that you will absolutely do that. Now, before Zach Hughes admitted to the murder of Christina Parcell, the state called approximately 32 witnesses. We submitted close to 200 exhibits. If you put all this on a hard drive, it's a little over 4 terabytes of information. And all of that taken together, it's a lot of evidence to digest. Now, with the admission of Zach Hughes to a lot of the state's case, the questions you were presented with at the beginning of the case really are answered. Regardless of what he may believed in his head, his actions are what matter in this courtroom. Actions speak louder than words. And boy, do we have a lot of cold, calculated, horrific actions in this case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you must find the facts based on the evidence in this trial and solely based on the evidence presented at this trial inside this courtroom. And it is undisputed that Zach Hughes planned, he lay and waited, he broke into Christina Parcell's home with a .22 and a knife, some roses. She had just returned home from an interview, from her last interview with Vet Tech. Zach Hughes, a person she had never met, she had never met him, beat her with a gun, brutally stabbed her 35 times, severing her jugular vein and her carotid artery. Now, as we go through the evidence and we look at some of the different things, I'm going to ask you to keep in mind of the charges that you're actually looking at. So the first charge I'm going to explain is the harassment charge. And there's two harassment. There's harassment and there's conspiracy to commit harassment. The only difference is the conspiracy requires two or more people joining and to commit the harassment. So harassment is just a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that serves no legitimate purpose and cause that person and would cause a reasonable person in his position to suffer mental or emotional distress. That's related to all those photos and those documents that you saw mailed out. I think there's 7 envelopes full of photos and other documents. You heard testimony about what was in those. Some of them are in evidence, some were just described, because those were pictures of Christina Parcell without any clothes on. So we didn't introduce those so as not to embarrass her or her family. Burglary first. A person is guilty of burglary first if he enters a dwelling without consent and with the intent to commit a crime. And I'll remind you, the judge is going to tell you the law is, what it is. I'm just trying to give you an outline so you can keep that in mind as we're going through this evidence. And they enter without consent and they're armed with a deadly weapon or cause physical injury. Well, those things all already appeared in this case. Zach Hughes went in under a ruse of roses according to his own testimony, but he went in directly with the intent to commit harm and he had weapons on him. And then you've got murder. You also have possession of the weapon during the commission of a violent crime. That is, if you used a weapon and you murder somebody, that is the possession of the weapon during that commission of a violent crime. But you have murder, which is the killing of any person with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought. And you're going to hear those words a lot in the judge's instructions. But malice is ill will towards another person, the intentional doing of a wrong act with the intent to inflict injury. And I think I said early on, ladies and gentlemen, it was a depraved heart, an angry heart, with the intent to harm somebody. And there's also express malice, meaning it's expressed, it's right there in front of you. And it's shown when there are words of hatred or when someone prepares to do the act. They prepare to go in there. It's called premeditation, is what you'll hear the judge charge you. Premeditation is preparing to go and harm somebody, like lying in wait, like buying weapons beforehand, by concealing your identity, going in there. Those kinds of things are premeditation, things that you do in preparation of the violent act. And if you find those things, and you find the state proved those beyond a reasonable doubt, then you can find the defendant guilty. So before we get in, let's start with a little background now. You know the players, you know everybody involved in here, you know the victim. You've heard a lot about the victim, Christina Parcell. You've heard a lot about John Mello. You've heard a lot about Zach Hughes. And you've heard a lot about Christina Parcell and John Mello's daughter. So the background, and we're talking the time frame from 2020, October 2020-ish, to October 13th, 2021. So we're roughly a time span of 1 year. And what happens throughout that year that leads up to the murder of Christina Parcell? Zach Hughes never talked to Christina Parcell. He didn't know Christina Parcell. He never met Christina Parcell. And everything he knew about Christina Parcell, even according to his own testimony, was told to him by John Mello or shown to him in certain evidence. John Mello was in a nasty custody battle with Christina Parcell. We all know that. He was on his 4th round of custody disputes with Christina Parcell. Keep in mind, and according to the guardian ad litem, the prior 3 were just as nasty, but they had always been settled where John Mello would have significant custody of their daughter. But in April of 2021, that changed. The tide changed for John Mello because he took Aida out of the country in violation of that order, according to the Italian courts. And he took her to Italy. And Christina Parcell didn't even know about that until she saw a social media post where she realizes, my daughter's out of the country, I can't see or talk to her, and she's with her father. thus the continuation of this nasty child custody dispute. And then from October to April, Aida was living in Italy with little or no contact with Christina. So what did Christina do? She did what any mother would do, is she tried to get the return of her daughter. So she went through this process, and it was explained by Christina's sister, Tina Parcell, as well as the guardian ad litem, Vanessa Cormelo. She filed under what's called the Hague Convention, and she asked to have her daughter returned to her. She actually flew to Italy twice to have these hearings in Italy. And she was successful. She won that particular battle in this myriad of battles of child custody that have been going on between these two individuals. And so in April of 2021, that really set off John Mello. He was unhappy. And we know the things, and we're going to talk about the things that he did starting that day, through the WhatsApps, through the harassment letters, everything else, to solve that custody dispute problem. And that's where this case really, really began. That is when things turned not in favor of Christina Parcell. She lost her life as a result. So what is the relationship between Zach Hughes and John Mello? All right, so where did they all come into this mass of characters? Well, according to Zach, he met John on the streets of Greenville about August of 2020, and he was with Aida, and Zach played a very likable classical music piece that John Mello and Aida liked. And that's how they met. So they met that one time. And that was one of the few times that Zach Hughes actually met Aida Mello. And he talked about, they went on about 4 or 5, maybe 6 occasions where they were hanging out. They got some tacos one night. They saw a museum. But Aida Mello didn't know Zach Hughes. She didn't know who he was. She's a 9-year-old little girl who heard him play a piano piece, who's a friend of her dad's. And that's all the time they ever spent together. That's it. In August until October, John Mello left for Italy. And with him went Aida. So Zach Hughes never spent any more time with Aida, what little time he did during that small time, ever, never again. Now, he may have seen her on a FaceTime while he's talking to her dad. Or he may have seen her or seen videos of that, which he testified to. But Zach acted on this stand as if he could see into her soul. He could see into her eyes. He knew how she was feeling. He could tell that she gained weight and why she gained weight at a certain particular time in her life, in her adolescent life. He is drawing those conclusions on a little bit of information and nothing but whatever John Mello is feeding him. So, what's their first thing? Aida's back with her mother. She, in May, begins living at Canebrake with her aunt, Tina Parcell, and that's where they're living there. John Mello's in Italy, and Zach Hughes and John Mello decide, well, you know what we're going to do? Let's embarrass Christina Parcell. Let's make her life look bad. Let's make her look like a prostitute. That'll help me get custody of her. That'll help me with the guardian ad litem. And so John Mello, according to Detective Bevel, who testified, had photos, and according to the evidence right here, he had photos of Christina Parcell. And those photos were taken when she was much younger. And those photos are taken between 2 consensual adults engaging in what acts that 2 consensual adults can do. And that's it. And then he took those photos and he used them as a weapon. And he tried to make her look like a prostitute. Because that's what John Mello continually told Zach Hughes, according to his own testimony, Alex Field's affidavit. Let's make her look like a prostitute, and let's send them around to a neighborhood. Well, they sent him to a neighborhood where Brad Post lived. They didn't even send him to Canebrake. And we know this because in these WhatsApps, they talk about it specifically. They talk about, may I present to you my daughter's mother, Christina, Caroline Warren, escort. And we know there's a bunch of attachments that we can't see because Zach Hughes deleted these on October 13th. And when we retrieve them from WhatsApp, they're deleted. So you have to see us, investigator Sparkman, manipulating these WhatsApps. And then they sent them that way, and then Zach Hughes receives them. He gets them, and he sees an email that was sent to him as well. This email is very important. And he prepares all these packages to Brad Post, to Mr. Bradley Post. These are all his P.O. box. Brad Post. Cigar bar, where Brad Post hangs out. Misspells Mr. Post one time in the WhatsApps. Misspells it here, P-O-A-S-T, which is why we know it. But Zach Hughes admitted it. But this email here purports to come from Mullen Investigations. Mullen Investigations at protonmail.com. And it's cut out. And you've got this photo of Christina Parcell, and you've got another photo of Christina Parcell back there, which is the same ones that are in here, but there's no URL with Bella Dongion right here. And this is the escort site, and it says Caroline Warren. She became a member, Caroline Warren, in 2009. Well, this is 2021. And apparently this Mullen Investigations on May 16th found these photos attached to this website, except the photos don't have anything attached to the website. It's just a square of an escort site of Caroline Warren. Well, I don't know who that is. I know this. I know Caroline Warren. I know Mello Investigations, John Mello. Vanessa Carmelo testified to it. She received emails from Mullen Investigations, and she received lots of emails from people purporting to be John Mello. So Zach Hughes went to the trouble of preparing all these envelopes, manipulating all the items, the photos, the escort, and putting it together, and he wanted to make sure we knew it was her, and so we would add a cover letter